In 2013, there was a murder of an unfortunate 17-year-old black man in Florida after an altercation with the local neighborhood watch, where the man was walking home from the local convenience store, and their fatal altercation ended with Trayvon Martin being shot, and he did not survive. So there was no repercussions for a year until the perpetrator, George Zimmerman, had been put to trial, and the result of the trial was that he was only charged with self-defense, although there had not been any provocation from Trayvon Martin other than he looked suspicious. And this resulted in extreme outcry from the public and multiple protests, and prompted the coining of the term Black Lives Matter and started the Black Lives Matter movement. And with that, this was also a time of unrest for many of the Black community and many of the minorities in any community, especially with coming out of the 2008 recession. So there was not very much stability. And then with this addition of the violence that didn't have any any apparent rhyme or reason to it other than they looked suspicious, they started to protest and started to make themselves heard about what had been going against them for years and years. And this was only furthered by the deaths of two more men, Michael Brown and Eric Garner, in 2014 in New York, which prompted further protests in Ferguson. And this continued to grow, and it eventually became what we know today as the Black Lives Matter movement. And with the Black Lives Matter movement, as we know, it focuses on that de-escalation of police violence on Black communities and any other minorities in the US. And it aims to make people aware of the discrimination that they had faced for decades and had not been addressed for decades as well. It aims to address and to fix the unjust courts and the racial profiling that had been seen and had not been heard, and better the lives of those Black communities and of those minority communities.
After the 2013 murders, there are three women in particular that are noted for being some key leaders in the Black Lives Matter movement. These three women were Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi. So, Alicia Cullors was an American civil rights activist and also author, and she was known for doing a lot of work in the Black Lives Matter movement. But actually, she was also known for helping out a lot of other marginalized communities like the LGBTQ plus community and immigrants. Patrice Cullors was another American activist who was a co-founder in this movement. She was an artist and a writer, and she was actually the one that created the Black Lives Matter hashtag in 2013, which kind of really started the movement as far as media goes and got it more widespread. Opal Tometi is another one of the co-founders for this movement, which she kind of served as like a community organizer and a strategist to kind of just put together some ideas that they had and just kind of get the ball rolling on this movement so that it was again more widespread and more people were finding about like the injustice and everything that was going on at this time. So, to highlight some of the key events in this social movement, it obviously started off with the murder of Trayvon Martin in 2013, but it was also rapidly accelerated by the murders of people like Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and many others that really kind of started to get people riled up and wanting to make a change. In 2015, there was a campaign launched called Campaign Zero that was essentially a group that lobbied for policy and law changes, not only at the local level, but also at the state and federal level. The last key moment I'm highlighting is the killing of George Floyd in May of 2020, which, if we look at that time frame, it was right around when the pandemic was in full effect. So people were already sort of riled up by being locked down, and the killing of George Floyd really just boiled over into what we now consider the 2020 protests. The protests led into a global debate on racial injustice, policing changes, and many legislative proposals to combat police brutality, systematic racism, and qualified immunity.
So, to recap, Black Lives Matter largely argues for three things: to combat unnecessary violent action by the police, or police brutality, which is disproportionately targeted at Black citizens, to bring attention to and combat the over policing of minority neighborhoods, and to oppose the abuses carried out by private prisons. Counter arguments do exist for the movement, however, such as the claims that BLM protests often turn violent. Despite this claim, however, a 2020 report by ACLEDP found that the vast majority of demonstration events associated with the BLM movement were not violent, and that, in fact, in more than 93% of all demonstrations connected to the movement, demonstrators did not engage in violence or destructive activity. Today, the attention and support for the Black Lives Matter movement has fallen from its peak in 2020. In a 2020 report conducted by Juliana Horitz, Donna Braga, and Kylie Hurst for the Pew Research Center, it was found that 51% of adults said they supported the Black Lives Matter movement, a decrease from the 56% a year ago. And the percent who said they strongly support the Black Lives Matter movement dropped from 26% in 2022 to 22% in the new survey. The same study also found that roughly a third of Americans said the movement had been extremely or very effective at bringing attention to the racism against Black people, with less than half that amount saying that they thought the movement had been highly effective at increasing police accountability. Although many Americans feel that the Black Lives Matter movement has not been as successful as it could have been, it has played a role in garnering global attention for police injustices. And that awareness and public outcry for better is a great step on the pathway to reform.